How does a city become an empire? How does an empire become eternal? The story of Rome begins not with marble and legions, but with two brothers, a she-wolf and a prophecy. This isn't just a myth. It's the very soul of the city that would one day rule the world. Our story starts in the ancient kingdom of Alba Longa, where a princess named Rhea Silvia was forced into a life of sacred duty as a Vestal virgin. The cruel King Amulius, her uncle, wanted to ensure she would never have children who could threaten his stolen throne. But the gods had other plans. Mars, the formidable god of war, was captivated by her beauty and spirit. From their divine union, twin sons were born, Romulus and Remus. When King Amulius discovered the infants, his fear turned to rage. The prophecy that he would be overthrown by Rhea Silvia's descendants echoed in his mind. He gave a terrible order. The babies were to be drowned in the Tiber River. A servant was tasked with the grim deed. But as he looked upon the helpless twins, his heart failed him. He couldn't bring himself to commit such a monstrous act. Instead, he placed them in a small basket, entrusting their fate to the currents of the mighty river. The river, perhaps guided by a divine hand, carried the basket safely downstream. It finally came to rest at the foot of a hill that would one day be known as the Palatine. The twins' cries pierced the silence of the wilderness, reaching the ears of an unlikely savior, a she-wolf. This was no ordinary wolf. She was an animal sacred to their father, Mars. Drawn by their cries, she approached the basket. Instead of harming them, she began to lick their small faces, gently nudging them and offering them her own milk. For days, she nursed them, protecting them from the dangers of the forest. Their miraculous survival was not to go unnoticed. A shepherd named Faustulus was tending his flock nearby when he discovered the incredible scene. Two human infants being cared for by a wild wolf. Amazed, he and his wife, Acca Larentia, took the children home and raised them as their own sons. They gave them the names Romulus and Remus. Growing up among the shepherds and the rugged hills, the brothers became strong, bold, and natural leaders. They were handsome and fearless, their divine heritage shining through their humble upbringing. They gathered a band of loyal followers from the local shepherds and led them, defending their flocks from wild animals and their communities from roaming bandits. They were kings without a kingdom, their authority earned not by birthright, but by courage and character. One day, fate intervened. A dispute over stolen cattle broke out between the brothers' followers and the herdsmen of King Amulius. In the ensuing skirmish, Remus, ever the bolder and more impulsive of the two, was captured and taken back to Alba Longa to face the king's justice. Romulus was devastated, but not defeated. He refused to abandon his brother. Rallying his band of warriors, he devised a plan to storm the very city that had cast them out. He led his men in a daring attack on Alba Longa. The element of surprise and the ferocity of his followers overwhelmed the king's guards. Romulus fought his way to the throne room and confronted the tyrant Amulius. In a final, climactic battle, he killed the king, avenging his mother and fulfilling the prophecy that had haunted Amulius for so long. With the tyrant dead, the brothers freed their grandfather, Numitor, the rightful king, and restored him to the throne of Alba Longa. The city celebrated them as heroes. Numitor offered them positions of power and nobility within his court. But Romulus and Remus had no desire to live in the shadow of another man's rule, even their grandfathers. They had been raised by the wild, forged in struggle. They were builders, not courtiers. Their destiny, they felt, lay elsewhere. They decided to return to the place where their lives had been saved, the 7 hills by the Tiber River, and build a city of their own. It was here, on the threshold of their dream, that the two brothers, who had shared everything, found themselves divided. They couldn't agree on where to build their new city. Remus favored the Aventine Hill, a strategic and easily defensible position. Romulus, however, was drawn to the Palatine Hill, the very spot where the she-wolf had found them, a place he felt was blessed by the gods. Unable to resolve their dispute, they agreed to seek a sign from the heavens through augury, the practice of interpreting the flight of birds. They stood on their chosen hills, watching the sky. The first sign came to Remus. 6 vultures flew over the Aventine Hill. He rejoiced, believing he had won the god's favor. But shortly after, a much greater omen appeared to Romulus. 12 vultures circled above the Palatine. Romulus claimed victory, arguing that the greater number of birds signified a more powerful blessing. Remus argued that since he had seen the birds first, his claim was the valid one. Their bond, forged in a river and tempered by hardship, began to crack under the weight of ambition. The argument escalated. Romulus began to dig a trench and build a low wall around the Palatine Hill, marking the sacred boundary of his future city. As he worked, Remus, still seething with resentment, came to mock his brother's efforts. "Do you call this a wall?" he jeered, and in a final act of defiance and contempt, he jumped over the half-finished rampart. In that moment, something snapped in Romulus. This was more than a childish insult. To cross the sacred boundary, the pomerium, was a sacrilegious act, a terrible omen for a city not yet born. Enraged by the disrespect for his work and the gods, Romulus struck his brother down. As Remus lay dying, his blood soaking into the freshly tilled earth, Romulus uttered a chilling declaration. "So perish all who ever cross my walls." Upon this foundation of fratricide and sacrifice, the city of Rome was founded on April 21st, 753 BC. The first blood shed on its soil was that of a brother. Romulus became its first king, naming the city after himself. He was a brilliant and pragmatic leader. He established laws, created the Senate, and organized a powerful army. He opened the city as a sanctuary for fugitives, outcasts, and runaways, quickly growing its population. But the new city had a critical problem. It was a city of men. There were no women, and without them, Rome had no future. So Romulus devised a cunning and ruthless plan. He announced a grand festival, the Consualia, and invited the people of the neighboring tribes, including the Sabines, to attend with their families. In the middle of the festivities, at a prearranged signal, Romulus's men rushed into the crowds and abducted the young, unmarried Sabine women, carrying them off to be their brides. This act, known as the rape of the Sabine women, led to a bitter war. The Sabine men, led by their king, Titus Tatius, laid siege to Rome, determined to reclaim their daughters. The war raged until the Sabine women themselves intervened. Torn between their fathers and brothers and their new Roman husbands, they ran onto the battlefield, holding their newborn children, and pleaded for peace. Their courage ended the conflict. The Romans and Sabines united, ruling together and forging a single, stronger nation. From a divine birth and a brutal beginning, a city rose from the mud of the Tiber. Born from the conflict between brothers and built through both war and unity, Rome's destiny was sealed. It was a city founded on myth, built by will, and destined for eternity. Its story reminds us that greatness often has a dark and complicated origin. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of legend. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from history and mythology. See you next time.